Yeah. All right, well, I guess I'm going to kick it off. I've got a few things to go through in a long introduction, so people will trickle in as I'm doing it. But welcome everybody who's here now. Thank you for joining us. I think we're going to have a really, really big turnout today, one of the largest we've had, so we're excited about that. And today's discussion is going to be, it's going to revolve around the economic and tax effects of the new administrative's executive orders and some of the policies. But let me go ahead and kick off a little introduction about ourselves, Exit Advisors, and then I'll move on to the panel. Most of you know us. For those of you that do not, we are Exit Advisors is a Houston-based M&A advisory firm, and we provide a full suite of around the M&A and transactional services to our clients. But more importantly, we really focus on educating and preparing our clients well in advance, so that they can create value and retain as much of that value as possible, even post-transaction. So what we're doing here today, educating our clients, getting them prepared, it's part of our motto. So let me move on to introducing the panel now. We've got Gary Cooper, President and CPA of Cooper CPA, and Managing Partner of Exit Advisors. We've got David Acosta, the President of Acosta Forensic Accounting. It's always good to have a forensic accounting group when diving into some of the nuances of tax and whatnot, but David's also an old friend of ours. We've got Al Danto, also a managing partner of Exit Advisors and faculty at the Jones Graduate School of Business at Rice, valuation expert, and Aaron Ball of Ball Weelborg Attorneys, and Aaron focuses on business, trade, and transactional services around the legal work. So let's start diving into the discussion for today. We know that the new administration has made a lot of executive orders. I think to count to date it's at 29. So today we're going to hone in on a lot of those policies and orders, but the ones that are most relevant to business owners. And within our realm, we're going to kind of focus on three major arenas, which are healthcare, tax, and economic policy. Before we kick off, though, I'm going to go over some kind of rules, a little bit of the format and structure. We're going to try to keep each point within the overall discussion to about 6 minutes, with 2 minutes per person, and I'll be calling on you. Someone will kick off, another person will respond, and then I'll either rotate between a closing remark by the third person on the panel, or we'll just leave it for open discussion. But don't worry if you get lost, I'll keep you on track. Like I said, we're going to be introducing and discussing these policies, but we're going to leave really the final interpretation and like further research to you. And we may get kind of specific around some of these executive orders, but we might leave some of these orders out. We're not going to speak on every single one, but we're really trying to discuss the nature of the overall initiatives. Let's see. And if you have questions throughout, we're going to try to leave some time at the end to discuss them. And if we get something super specific, we're happy to chat with you offline about those. So before we kick off on our first topic, I'd like to pass it over to David. David, just give us a little bit of clarification around an executive order versus law and what's going to get through, just so everyone's kind of on the same page here.
Well, thank you, Andrew. I want to thank you all for participating today. I want to thank the Exit Advisors for inviting me. I'm honored to be with them. Gary, Al, Aaron, Andrew, these are all very smart people, and I think you're going to learn from them. I'm here to learn myself from them. I was looking at their mission statement. One word that pops out of me all the time is the word prepare. These guys are like Boy Scouts. Be prepared. That's the thing that a lot of our clients and a lot of our own business people don't do. And I'm not talking about a 1-year strategic plan or a 3-year strategic plan or a 5-year strategic plan. I'm talking about preparing for the rest of your life and beyond, because when you die, you're going to leave family, you're going to leave investors, you're going to leave your workers, you're going to leave creditors, you're going to leave the government. They're going to miss you. You're going to miss those taxes. But the key is to always be prepared. And that's what Exit Advisors does. It prepares you. And that's what we're doing here today with these executive orders. We're trying to prepare for the future. An executive order is just that. It has to do with the executive department of the government, right? There's three branches: judicial, the legislative, and the executive. And President Biden, he's like the CEO of any other big company. You know how many people work for the federal government? 2.1 million people. Now, he's the CEO of one of the largest employers in the world. All right. Now, these executive orders, they give him the power to do things within that CEO position, but he can't pass laws. Like if he wants to pass this law, this new thing called the American Rescue Plan, which is a $1.9 trillion plan, he's got to go ask Congress for them to pass a bill. But these executive orders are it's looking into the future about where he's going. Like for instance, healthcare, which is one of the things we're talking about today. On the surface of it, this one executive action where he says, I'm going to extend the time for people to sign up for the ACA or the Affordable Care Act. Some people know it as Obamacare. You know, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but think about what it means. It means that President Biden is going to expand upon the Affordable Care Act. It means that it's going to affect healthcare costs. It's going to affect the insurance industry, which is 15% of our economy. It's going to affect your client. It's going to affect your workers. Are you going to buy insurance for them? Are they going to be able to buy insurance on the open market? And then what happens there? It goes from there to something called the public option, which means people can opt to buy their personal insurance, or they can go into the government. And then later on, Medicare for all, which means everybody's going to have a one-payer system. We buy just like Medicare. Everybody can sign up for it. So you're talking about that one little executive action that you think doesn't sound like a lot. It's a lot, and it affects you, it affects your clients, and it affects the economy overall. So that's where we are today. Now, when President Trump was there, in 4 years, he signed 69 executive actions, and in 3 weeks, President Biden's already signed 29. So the train done left the station. The exit advisors, and I'm here to tell you, you need to prepare for what's coming down the pike. And I'm going to turn it over to Al on that.
Well, actually, David, I want to kick off because we're going to start the first discussion around healthcare, and you were starting to touch on the Affordable Care Act. So I'd like for you to touch on your understanding of the impact and the effect that these types of healthcare policies are going to have on employers and the overall healthcare system. And then I'm going to give Gary a chance to respond, followed by Aaron.
Okay. The pandemic has exposed a lot of, I don't want to call them inequity, but it exposed a lot of things that we weren't really thinking about. Like, for instance, employer-sponsored healthcare. If somebody loses their job, they no longer have health insurance. So what does that do? First of all, they can't just get up and go see a doctor. So they wait to go see a doctor until they're so sick that it ends up costing them a lot of money, or they end up being in the emergency room. And what does that do to costs? Well, that goes up. What does that do for the insurance company? Well, they got to absorb those costs. And then what are they going to do? They're going to pass it on to people that are buying them. The premiums are going to go up. So this one deal about the Affordable Care Act is going to affect us all the way down the pike. It's going to affect the people at the top level. It's going to affect the people down at the bottom level. And it's going to affect those 80% of what we call middle America. So it is not unimportant about the discussion about the Affordable Care Act, because it's going to affect costs, and it's going to affect our premiums, and it's going to affect a big section of the economy. Now, what happens when you affect 15% of the economy? That's going to trickle to everybody that they're related to. People that are related to people that are in the insurance industry, people that buy from them, people that sell to them. And so what happens, it affects 100% of the economy. So we need to get a handle of where we think Biden and this new administration, where are they going? And so we, like Exit Advisor does, is going to be prepared for that. So we're here to try to help you prepare for it and try to help you tell your clients and your workers what's coming down the pipe.
All right, Gary, you want to respond? You've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I actually talked to my son this morning, who's an anesthesiologist, and just wanted to kind of get a feel for how it affects the medical world first. And, he tells me that, hospitals have thin margins as it is right now. And if we did this Medicare for all, then it's certainly going to cut into their profits, which could be a little bit higher if they're going to third-party insurance. He also claimed that, it would probably put remote locations out of business. So, Houston having a large medical center could sustain, but you got the smaller communities with smaller hospitals and locations like that. It could definitely damage them financially. I look at this too from a standpoint from the tax side. Taxes will have to go up across the board, to be able to provide this. So we're going to talk a little bit about the taxes later. So the overall cost to the general public is going to expand, and it also increases regulation. And so for regulation, you have basically bigger government. You're turning over basically a business from the private sector over to the government. And obviously it's going to affect a lot of jobs. So there's jobs in the insurance industry, there's jobs in the medical world, and we're all worried about jobs right now. So there's going to probably be a lot of job cuts if this plan were to be put in place. That's just my thoughts as far as the healthcare for all. If somebody else, Aaron, wants to jump in.
Yeah, Aaron, you want to kind of wrap it up with closing remarks around healthcare and what you see?
Sure. Well, the idea behind Affordable Care Act and the move towards Medicare for all is to expand healthcare and to make it affordable for everyone. And the data shows that coverage did increase, but the outcome in most businesses that are covered by the act was that they had to cut, because of the cost of compliance, they had to cut hours for employees, and they had to revisit the type of coverage they were going to offer. So most of the clients I work with told me, yeah, we reduced hours, the compliance costs went up, and so everyone was covered, but the type of package that my employees received was less robust than what they had before the act came into place. So most employees were paying the same or increased cost as part of their employee contribution and receiving fewer services that were covered by the policy. And I had clients call me shocked to discover that, a pregnant mom would show up at the hospital and learn that, maternity care wasn't covered under the new plan after the changeover. So I think we're already seeing a theme here that'll pervade a lot of these discussions, which is increased compliance costs, increased costs, and decreased quality of service to employees and to consumers generally.
All right. Well, let's kind of transition from healthcare into how we're going to pay for all of this healthcare, and that's going to be obviously with taxes. And so the first point of discussion that I'm going to let Al kind of kick this off. It's going to be around, where are taxes going? Obviously, they're going to be going up. But what is it going to look like for capital gains? What's it going to look like for business valuation? How does that translate into M&A activity, maybe for the next year to 2 years?
Hey, thanks, Andrew. Hey, before I get started, I'd just like to kind of have a preamble to all this. As we pontificate and talk about all this stuff, it's really important for you to realize, how's this going to impact me? Right? It's going to impact different people different ways. Are you a startup company, just starting a company? Are you looking to retire and exit? I have a lot of students and younger people that I work with that are really into like alternative investments. So they say, man, inflation for my investments is going to be good because I'm in maybe Bitcoin or gold or hard assets or something. So as we, and as an educator, my goal and our goal here is to open the door. This is a start, and do more research, because it's going to impact different people in different ways, some good, some bad. So we want to really open the door and help you really start to think about this. And hopefully this is the start of, your research and your investigation into what's going on. I've dusted off a lot of my old economic books and online, and following some people who are talking about inflation, what the stimulus package is going to do, how inflation generates, stuff like that. And I just encourage you all after this to really take a look at it. As we look at individual income tax rates increasing, oftentimes we think, wow, the rich are just going to, pay more taxes, which is a good thing. But this also includes S corps and LLC pass-through taxes. So for a year, I've had the fortunate opportunity to be involved in 2 Inc. 500 companies that are, we're fast-growing companies. And for years, we had to pay taxes on income that flowed through to us, but we didn't have the cash because the cash was tied up in working capital. The cash was tied up in inventory, items like this. We had to borrow money to go pay taxes. So as you think about this, if you're an S corp, do we want to tax our small businesses at 40%? And how's that going to impact you as you look at this stuff? So really important to consider that. Now, I'm an advocate for small businesses, and I think we need to help small businesses get cash in their pockets, deregulate them, make them grow, be successful. So that's the viewpoint that I have in this world. So if you're a small business owner and you have a growing company, you've got to realize now that you can potentially be taxed at 40%. And if you take in consideration your self-employment, we may be taxing America's small business at 50%.
Yep.
Right, Gary, David? I'm not an accountant, but I hang around with a lot of them. And so, just something you got to start to take a look at.
Yeah.
I want to reiterate a little bit about what Al said about the various participants, the various stockholders or shareholders or the people that are all different. One of the things that I see on exit advisors, they develop a tailored strategy. So a company that has 25 employees is not going to be the same thing as one that has 100. It's not going to be the same as one that has 5. So you got to think about how these tax rates are going to affect each one of these different people. So you can't just say one size fits all. And it depends on your industry. It depends on the geography. Are you in New York or are you in Montana? It depends on where you fit in this. Either you're one of the workers, or you one of management, or you're one of the owners. So all these things have to be thought about. And one of the things I was thinking about is that when Al said we don't have all the answers to all that, this is true. But we need to ask the right questions for the right people. And that's when you go to somebody like Exit Advisors or some other person that's going to advise you, they got to know how to ask the right questions for you. And everybody's a little bit different.
Well, and I know, just real quick, I know we're going to jump into the minimum wage. And it's interesting, David, you talked about geographical location. Well, that minimum wage is going to have probably more of an impact on somebody in Wyoming or somebody, in a more rural state or a smaller state than it is a New York and a California. So that's a very interesting point.
Aaron, any follow-up thoughts there?
I mean, something to echo what Al said is I see the primary, in terms of deal activity, and maybe you're going to address this in the M&A section, but, I see for those investors who are have holdings in equities, tax increases definitely shift investor behavior. And we saw this during the Obama administration earlier with the popularity of investment vehicles like REITs and master limited partnerships that had mandated distribution requirements, right, for tax purposes, and no entity level tax. And that was a desirable outcome for investors. But the downside of that investment behavior, it's a lot of unintended consequences, is it drives investors in one direction. In the case of REITs and MLPs, especially MLPs in the commodities sector, like we see in Houston with energy, because of those tax structures, they were ill suited to survive a downturn. And so you actually saw bankruptcy and a loss of investment capital in a lot of those entities for investors who didn't get out fast enough.
Yeah, well said. Al, just to circle back to the initial question, how do you see this affecting business valuations though in the coming, for at least 2021 and then into 2022?
Yeah, I can give a couple examples of that. So before we were in the middle of doing valuations, and taxes to a business are an expense like any other expense. Mm-hmm. So businesses are valued on their cash flow and the potential prospects of generating future cash flow. So if you start to look at taxes, you're taking that out of their cash flows. So in valuation theory, it's going to, any increase in taxes is going to relatively decrease the value of a business, right, based on its free cash flow. So you see that. Another thing that business owners looking to sell, and if their capital gains are going to be treated at 40%, maybe the potential for some type of wealth tax, that's a huge bite. And most small business owners, have the bulk of their retirement assets tied up in their business, and they have to have a sale of the business to have a liquidity event. So these are an impact that you potentially have. Your choice of entity creation. So if you're a C corporation, right, and for years, C corporation, double taxation, all that, but founder stock in a C corporation is what most business owners would have. It's not subject to capital gains at the sale of a company. It's an election called a 1202 election. So these are things that really need to go into your strategy, and we see business owners that, Gary and I had one, he actually checked what he thought was the wrong box, was a C Corp election in an LLC, and basically got virtually, most of his capital gains taxes back that he already paid. And others, it's on the other side. So again, these are just strategies that you have to take a look at, and they're certainly going to impact business valuations, some more than others, and it's going to certainly impact the takeaway money that a small business owner is going to look when they look to sell their business and retire.
I'd like to kind of reiterate one thing that you touched on, Al, real quick, is the liquidity event for the business owners. And I know nothing's been passed yet, but all of us who have our own businesses, we've always relied on that event. And, it's like this, if they double the taxes on that liquidity event, some people won't be able to sell their businesses. They won't be able to sustain. And this is a really, really important tax change that we need to focus on. And I mean, even to a point of reaching out to your congressman, that they could have a large event across the country.
Back in 2008, we had a top rate of 15%, and that lasted for about 5 years. And then in 2013, they added this 20% to the higher people that were making more money. And so it's been going on for a long time. And now you have this automatic doubling of the tax on the capital gain. Is going to be a significant thing. And it's going to make you want to think, well, should I be doing the same thing I've been doing, or should I be going into something else? Now we got to think about, well, what is it that's going to be beneficial? We know that we are going to pay more taxes over here. The chances are we're going to pay tax because right now Biden has 50 senators on the Democratic side. There's 50 Republicans, but on any kind of a tie, the vice president is going to come in and vote with the Democrats. So the chances of these things getting passed are very good. All right. So what do we got to do as people that are counseling other people? Is we got to, first of all, we got to tell them this is what's going down. And then we got to figure out some strategies. Look, what can we do to mitigate this? Not just say, oh, woe is me, man, we're going to pay more taxes and things are going to be bad. What can I do to take advantage of this and go somewhere else where I'm not going to be hurt so bad, or maybe go into renewables or something that's being subsidized right now? Because the reasons right now, the cost of starting a renewables and this kind of not anti, but it's not the oil and gas business and all that, is that the reason they're surviving right now is because the government is giving them subsidies because it's so expensive to start up one of these things. But these costs are going to be going down as we go into the future. And in fact, a lot of people have already started checking this out, like General Motors. They said that by 2035, they're going to be 85% of their vehicles are going to be electric. So they're already shifting that type of mentality of, okay, what's going to be beneficial to me? What's going to be detrimental to me? And they're shifting to something else. And the same thing has to do with these tax rates. Okay, we see this coming down the pike. So what do we as advisors, what do we tell those people? You know, then that's what I'm thinking. That's the question we need to ask. How do we prepare for what's coming down the pike?
Yep.
I'd like to make sure we don't run out of time, but cover this last point on the tax subject. I'd like Aaron and Gary to kind of glance over estate taxes, lifetime exemptions, and some of the finer details there. I think basis step up, lack of control discounts. Gary, can you touch on that? And Aaron, you chime in as well.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at estate taxes, I'm gonna defer to Aaron on a lot of this because I know that he dabbles in this quite a bit. But there's some things, to focus on. The lifetime exemption. Right now, it's about 11,400,000 and some change. And at one time, even as early as 2001, it was only like $600,000. And what that means is that you can file a gift tax return. You can leave up to 11,400,000 and not have to pay taxes. Or at death, you have portability to where you can carry over if one, the spouse passes away first, and you have about $22 million. Well, there's talks of reducing that to 3.5 million. And it's really interesting with all the billionaires and the massive wealth. I mean, you would think it would go from 11 million to 50 million, but it's something, and they're talking about increasing the state taxes as well as far as the rate. The step up in basis is really a concern, to where when you inherit something now, they step up to basis to market value when you receive it. What that would be is repealing that, and you would get it at original cost basis. So you think, I mean, you get a building, the building originally cost your great grandfather $1, and it's worth 10 million. Well, guess what? If you sell that building, your basis will be $1. And you'd have to pay gains. And if they increase capital gains to ordinary, then you're really going to get hit. Last one, lack of control and lack of marketability discounts. It's kind of a technical thing in the valuation world. And they tried to do away with that about 3 years ago. And so what that means, in essence, there's a calculation to where if you leave something, to a beneficiary, and let's say you're a family limited partnership and they don't have control, there's a lack of control discount, lack of marketability. So in short order, I mean, you leave $100 CD and you only have to put about $60 on the gift tax return. So that could really have an impact on basically delivering assets to your beneficiaries. So all of this, I know no law's been passed yet, but I know it's a focus, to increase our taxes. I'll kind of turn this over to Aaron. I know you've got a lot of experience in estate planning and from a legal perspective.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. There's not been a change yet. It's a little over 11 million per person. And as Gary mentioned, they're talking about reducing it down to 3.5 million. That was the campaign promise. It's a little dusty right now. I don't think it would be unrealistic to see them even try and go lower than that. depending on how much juice they feel that they have on the legislative side as the year progresses. But it's definitely on the target list, and most people who work in that area consider it a matter of when and not if. Now, for small and mid-sized business owners, what I'm seeing is people panicking a bit because they were living life under the 11.7 exemption, and they could sell their small business without, or pass on their small business without having to worry about the estate tax issues. Now they're having to go to their lawyer and their accountant and spend money on planning and restructuring. And one of the impediments I see from the sell side, which is Exit Advisors' focus, is adding complexity to capital structures, or how you own the business and where those that ownership is transferred for estate planning purposes. Gary and I ran into this with a client who had, and Al as well, who had to sell a business but had a complex estate planning structure that was set up during a high tax period, and it caused problems on the sell side when they went to sell their business. So for the small and mid-sized business owner, it adds cost and complexity. And once you put a structure in place that involves family members, for example, holding part of your business, you really need to think. If you're dealing with an estate planning attorney, you also need to step out of that box for a little bit and talk to a business lawyer and an accountant that deals with business issues and business sales, to see how that's going to impact saleability, marketability, and potentially the value of your company when you go to exit.
Thank you. All right, I'm going to try to get these two questions really quickly so we can get over to the next topic. Like 5-second question for you, Aaron. Do you know what the timeline of the capital gains tax increase is going to look like?
I do not. Granted, I was holed up in a conference room in Mexico last week for clients, so I've been out of the off the internet reading the latest for a week, but and feel free to step anyone else. I've not heard anything on timing.
I've been keeping up with what's going on. I don't believe, and this other people don't believe that Biden is going to do any of these things in the near future. The reason is because the economy is so bad, and he's doing the stimulus payment. American Rescue Plan, and even after that, he's got the ARP Part 2, the second part of this rescue plan, and I don't believe that he wants to, or the Democrats or anybody else wants to do anything that we're talking about right now while we are down, while the pandemic's not under control, for one thing, while the economy's not down. We don't have the small businesses up and running like we need to. And I don't think they're going to mess with that, because I think it's going to be very unpopular if he starts doing these things in the middle of a pandemic, in the middle of an economic downturn. So this is what I'm reading. This is what I'm hearing. Some of my Democratic friends talking about that they're not going to do this right away, but we need to get ready sometime, maybe at the beginning of next year.
So it's not on the House legislative calendar yet, then, right?
It's not.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing it.
Now in October, they had a thing called the SSR Act, the Securing a Strong Retirement Act, and they had some of these things were in there, but they haven't really talked about it very much. And it's on the back burner right now because they're trying to get this $1.9 trillion ARP passed right now. And he's still gonna. He says he's still open to, like, for instance, the $15 minimum wage. He might not want to go that way, and they're going to try and target these stimulus payments to certain individuals that weren't on the first list. So that makes sure that people that get it, that really deserve to get it or need to get it, and the people that don't need it don't get it. So they're still talking about those kind of things, but those are on the edges. You know what I mean? It looks like it's going to happen for this stimulus package. But as far as tax changes and law changes, I don't see that happening for at least till next year, which means it's good for, you know, for you to go to people like exit advisors and other advisors to get ready for this to happen. So you've got a few months to get it together, but go ahead and start doing now and get ready for next.
All right, last point, then we got to switch because we're running over. But Al, I've always appreciated your comments on this. But someone was asking, you know, if our debt has gone up from 8 to 28 trillion over the prior administration's time in office, how do we reduce this?
Well, you know, I've become a lot more comfortable with our debt, and here's the reasons why. You know, if you look at every time we take treasury bills, we sell them, we're putting cash in the economy. And what are we doing with that cash? Are we getting a return on our investment? So if you look at, I think household net worth is up to $125 trillion. The market's up. You know, what's our net equity? My very first house that I ever owned was $62,500. I had a $57,000 loan on it. It was $57,000 in debt. You know, I'm 60 years old and I own several properties and everything. My debt is a lot higher, but my net equity is many times higher than it was before. So are we getting a return on our investment? What's our net equity? What are we doing with that money? It's incredibly low interest rates that we're paying on this. And at the end of the day, do we want that money floating through our economy, or do we want the government to just simply increase taxes and take more of that back, right? And not do less. So I think, yeah, again, I just encourage everyone out there to really take a broad look at this. You know, what is a debt? Where is it? Not just that we've increased it. How does it relate to our GDP growth? How does it relate to how much is owned by the Federal Reserve? In essence, do we owe ourselves this money? How much is owned for them? What are we doing? Are we able to pay it back? What does it take to pay it back? You get a little bit more comfortable as you gather facts on stuff like this, right? So you've got to look at it, and I've just got a little bit more comfortable. I'll talk a little bit about what's going on with inflation later and where we're at with this. But again, just read and encourage and see where that's going for. Just to say, oh, we've increased our debt to 21 trillion or whatever it is right now.
That's a really good analogy.
On the surface, there's a lot of factors on the surface.
Yeah, really well said. All right, let's pivot over to more of the economic policies. And I'm going to go back to Aaron, and I want Aaron to kind of dive into minimum wage, the executive order to increase minimum wage, and how that's going to impact employment, hiring, and can even intertwine with healthcare a little bit.
Yeah, well, I mean, on its face, the increase in minimum wage, I mean, the argument is, we've been having this argument for years, right? It stifles entry for new workers, stifles entry for young workers, increases business costs, causes employers to reduce hours and create more part-time employees. I think for me, the more interesting question is the combination, the confluence of these various orders, and the one that I'm really keen to talk about is energy. But if you look at the net impact of these operating together, you're talking about, right now things look great, right? We've got CPI numbers look good. Inflation year over year is looking good. It's under control. State tax receipts are up. Last week's employment numbers were pretty good. You see capital goods orders up, but we're a month into the new administration and you haven't fully seen the impact of these policies implemented. So any increase, especially as a ratio of the workforce to this low end of workers in terms of wages, is going to have a serious impact on the job numbers that came out. Right now, we're feeling the reverberation of the opening or gradual opening from last year, but a mandated wage is going to be stifling, especially for a lot of my clients that work that are dependent on those new entry workers for a lot of their employees.
Let me
David,
remind
do you
you.
have any response to that?
Well, I'd like to respond, but I'd like to remind people that Biden has passed this, this executive order has to do with $15 an hour for government workers. Now, he has the power to do that because that's part of the executive, his executive authority for running the government, okay? But that doesn't mean just because he wants a $15 an hour that it's going to happen. He has to ask Congress if they want to do it across the country and make it a law where everybody has to do it. Now, states themselves can do this, and they've done that. They've done it in Washington, they've done it in New York. Cities themselves can opt to do this for their workers, okay? So they've already started this move towards the $15 an hour across the country. You know, it's in some 21 states or something like that, in different cities and different states, they have done this $15 an hour minimum wage. Okay, so it's already going that route. It's not a law for the federal government where everybody in the country has to do it.
David, can't the federal government effectively coerce the implementation of $15 an hour through federal relief funds and the distribution of tax dollars?
Well, that is something that has to be talked about, because the Congress can come in and say that particular executive action is unconstitutional, or you can't do it. It's not part of your, you know, what your authority is. And like, for instance, a bunch of these Trump's executive orders were taken to court, and they were not allowed. Well, they can do that too, because there's a question is whether or not he can go mandate a contract, for instance, to the state of Texas and say, okay, you guys are going to have to pay these guys $15 an hour. And he's going to have some pushback from people, even some Democrats like Joe Manchin out of West Virginia. They're not going to, they don't like that kind of stuff. Well, you're mandating stuff that everybody hadn't gone along with, okay? I don't think it's going to be hard for him to do that. Now, the other side of that coin is that we got, you know, I don't know what the amount of how many millions of people are on the poverty, and that you know, I've heard that we can get, you know, 3.5 million people. I think it was 35 million. I was trying to think about I saw it this morning in the paper, and I couldn't remember the exact amount, out of poverty, which means that these people have money to go spend, and then it spurs the economy. And that's what I heard on some of the people on the left saying that, hey, look, we need this money to get these people to start becoming part of the economy, so that it pushes everybody, the benefits all the way up the chain. And that's what some of the people say about why it's good to have $15 minimum wage. So,
yeah, I would just, since I started on this, I would just respond by, you know, if you look at first the federal government, just like Trump did. I mean, I'm not, you know, picking sides here, but the federal government can effectively coerce state action on issues like this by threatening to withhold federal funds if they don't comply with, legislation. But on the point of, you know, giving people more money at the lower end of the spectrum, and therefore they have money to spend, it helps the economy. If you look at the cities, especially on the West Coast in states like Washington and Oregon, where they've implemented these minimum wages, you've seen almost exactly tracking the increase in the minimum wage, an increase in prices, right? Rents go up, retail prices go up. So what is the real impact, right, on people? To me, and the reason why I answer more broadly on the question of minimum wage is the few people understand the power and the control that the federal labor unions have over the administrative state in the country. And I see this on the federal side as just a canary in the coal mine. This is, you're right, it is already, there's already a movement underway for this. The danger is we already have the example in many of these cities where they performed this experiment to see how it works out, and they might get a short-term boost, but the increase in living costs that goes along with some of this, and the decrease in full-time employment, which is tied into healthcare, right, which is tied into other issues, has always resulted in an abysmal failure. And so I'm really pessimistic about the potential, starting with the labor unions, the potential impact that this will have on the general economy.
I'm gonna kind of move things around real quick because I was gonna discuss employment and stimulus later, but I feel like that segues well into what we've already been discussing. Aaron or David, kick off your thoughts around, where you see unemployment going and how that's going to intertwine with, the stimulus packages that have and are going to continue to come through from the government, and then we'll open it up for 2 minutes for anyone to respond.
Well, part of that money, that $1.9 trillion, is to help people that are unemployed. Now, the money goes through, like here in Texas, it has to go through Texas Workforce Commission, and then it comes through to the people that are unemployed right now. And even though we're not as bad as we were at the height of the pandemic, economists are saying that they're not getting back into the workforce as quickly as they need to be. So we need to help those people out. Now, the other thing about the stimulus payment is that a lot of people right now, for instance, they don't want to go out to eat. They're afraid on getting COVID. These people at like the restaurants and other stores, they need some help in order for people, for them to protect themselves and protect their own people and protect their clients and the customers, to come into their store, to come into the restaurants and eat and all that. So I think what Biden his main idea was that we need to get a handle on this pandemic. And while we're doing that, we need to provide a safety net for the people that aren't working, for the people that are whose companies are dying, and some of them have already gone out of business. I go down the street, man, and I see businesses that have shut down. I mean, I used to go to these places. I go, God, they're not even open anymore. And I'm saying, man, what a drag. How come we couldn't help them? How come the government couldn't come and help them while this pandemic was going on? Which I think is what they're trying to do right now. And I think if, in their eyes, if we get a handle on this pandemic, if we can just keep people and throw them, get them over the bridge, we can go back to normal maybe in the next 2 or 3 years to get back to where we were before the pandemic here. And I think that's what they're trying to do right now with this money. Okay, but some people don't like the fact that they're giving money to governments, because some people don't think that governments some of them are run not too well or whatever, but then there's no definition of what a government is when it runs well or not. But the fact is that they're all they all need somebody. They're either Republicans or Democrats, or in every stratosphere, every state has them. So they also need to get people back in school, right? How do you get them back in school if they don't want to go? The teachers right now in Chicago are striking because they say we're not protected and we don't want to go kill ourselves and kill our family by making us go over there and teach. So what do? You got to give the states money so that they can have safe distancing, so they can have things in place so you can't breathe on somebody. They have to have a good air conditioning system. That all costs money. All right. And that's what Biden and his people are thinking, that we need to give these states money so that they can get people back in school, because everybody agrees that this last year has been bad for the education of our children. It's been bad for the depression for everybody. So we need to help them out. But that's where they're coming from.
Well, we've touched on, the stimulus and taxes, and obviously there's a massive influx of money. But I want to go back to Al because Al was kind of hinting at this earlier. But Al, can you talk about inflation, resource costs across the country, and even relevant to Houston and the U.S. Talk about the kind of energy perspective there as well.
Sure. Yeah, and this may help to answer a couple of questions that came through too. One of them was, why is the Dow Jones Industrial Average at an all-time high, with these tax increases and everything, and who benefits from Biden's tax policy? So I think this will kind of cover that. So really, I think we're seeing almost a separation between the real performance of the economy. And if you looked at a pure finance and you looked at our decline in GDP and future outlook, the market really probably shouldn't be doing as well as it is, right?
Sure.
What's driving some of that, and what's driving this kind of, are we going to go through inflation with all this stimulus and everything's going? So let me share my screen real quickly. Can you give me screen sharing here, Andrew or Mari? Okay. Let me just pull this up. So are we going to have inflation, or are we not going to have inflation? Big question. It's a toss up right now, and in a lot of it, you talk to smartest economists in the world, and they've got both sides of it. So we have this incredible increase in money supply. We've got an incredible increase in household net worth, right? We've got an increase in supply costs. Energy is going up. We're reducing supply, increasing regulations. We have a loose central bank, low interest rates, zero bank reserve requirements right now. A bank can lend money and not have a reserve requirement in there. Incredible loose policy. Supply shock. Housing prices are going up. A lot of material costs are going up and everything. And we have an increase in taxes going up, right? Theoretically, we should have an incredible spike in inflation. What's holding it back? Well, the velocity of money. People are not spending money right now. Fear, households are hoarding cash. We have an aging population. We have pretty high unemployment right now. We're not using all our resources. Typically, inflation happens when you've got full utilization of resources, and the only thing you can do is increase prices, right? So inflation, we're not at full production. This is an interesting slide right here. This is the velocity of money. We're not spending money. It's not going through the economy. If you look at it, it's at an virtually an all-time low here in 2020. So the money's coming out, but what's happening to it? It's getting hoarded. These are the central bank reserves, almost an all-time high. We've got all this capital that's kind of outside. And you've got this, aging baby boomer. I'm one of them, right? I'm paying down debt. I'm putting as much away and saving as I can. And this is what's happening is our baby boomers are aging, right? We're putting money away. So you look at all those factors and everything. So the fact that where we put our money, we put it in the stock market. We put it in our mutual funds. I heard driving over here today that retail investment is an all-time high. A lot of that's driving the stock market and everything. And again, I'll end like I started. I just encourage you to research this and look at it and see how it's going to impact you, and keep your eyes on it. Keep your eyes on it, on what's starting to happen. It's going to have to move in one direction or the other. This was a really interesting article in Kiplinger's that came out. It talked about stagflation, what happened in the early 70s. Happened in the 70s because we had a 400% increase in energy prices. So now if we have these supply shock and supply increases, and we have costs that go up because of energy, food costs, transportation costs go up, but we still have high unemployment, read this article. It's out there and read on it. So, personally, this is just one person's opinion. I don't think that the current market, it's really reflective. It's just it's almost like we've got the economic performance of our GDP and everything, and what our country's doing, the company's doing, and then you've got this market here that everyone's kind of put their money in and investing on. So sooner or later, you're going to come back to the mean, the relation of it. So again, just Keep an eye on all this stuff.
Thanks, Al. All right, well, we've got about 5 or so minutes left. So the last topic I wanted to talk about was, the Buy American initiative that Biden announced. And maybe, David, you could kick off, followed by Gary, about how that's going to affect credits to businesses that build all American. And David, I think you mentioned some really interesting points yesterday that I'd like to hear.
Well, one of the things that I right off the bat when I saw this was that how's he going to do it? And I looked at the top 15 companies, and all of them had anywhere between 20 to 50, and a couple of them 60% of their revenue was from other countries. And a lot of their resources, for instance, to build a car or General Electric, all these people that get all these different resources all over the world. How can you get truly an American-made product or American-only type of business when we got multinational economy going on right now? Now, what happens on this Biden's initiative is he's going to give people a 10% credit if you buy American goods, if you buy American services and all that kind of stuff. My thinking is, how are you going to do that, and how limited is that? Because we have such a multinational, integrated economy that's going on, and I'm still trying to wrap my hand around that. You know what I mean? I know everybody wants to help our own people right now, like America First type thing. But since when has it just been totally America on its own when it comes to building products, when it comes to development, manufacturing, and and that brings in the trade wars that we're having with China and so forth and so on, and it's all integrated. So how do you extricate it where you can give where the credits are going to do any good? I'm just throwing that out.
Well, here's, if you look at the verbiage on this, it's a 10% credit to invest in revitalizing closed or nearly closed facilities, retooling or expanding facilities, and bringing production for service jobs back to the U.S. So, you got a double-edged sword here. So I wonder if you take minimum wage to $15. Kind of like, well,
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to bring all this production back over here? Are people going to be making too much? Are we going to be able to compete in the international markets? So that's the part that troubles me. How are we going to continue to compete when you've got people in other countries making $1 a week? So we're going to pay somebody $15 an hour. So to me, it's a good idea. It'd be awesome if we could do this, but you look at the economics of it, it looks pretty difficult.
Hey, Gary, just to add there was an interesting article that came out last week, and Amazon and Walmart increased their R&D development for robotics to automate a lot of this stuff versus, right, if all these ways, because it's going to really impact companies like that. So
to speak to, David made a really good point on implementation as well. When he asked, how is he going to do this? In other words, how do you determine whether something's American or not? Mm-hmm. This is the same game that's played on the trade tariff side and trade treaty side in determining whether a product comes from a particular country. And you have an entire government bureaucracy, charged with determining under the harmonized tariff system whether a product comes from South Korea or from Myanmar. And when you have a product like a car, which has assemblies and sub-assemblies and assemblies under the sub-assemblies, and it seems to me that we should focus on the job creation, because the administrative burden and simply the cost of trying to track what comes from where is already a gigantic burden on the federal government. And to try and implement it in a system, as Gary pointed out, that actually has a narrow sort of purpose in its implementation, it's limited in scope. It sounds great on paper, and people hear it on the news and they think, oh, that's super. but they have no clue what it would take to actually verify this information, and the burden on the business itself to prove that these items come from the US. In the case of manufacturing, especially, where you could get 15 and possibly justify $15 an hour, it would cost too much for a small to medium-sized manufacturer to just, to verify all those things.
Who would audit you? Who are
Exactly.
they going to bring?
Yeah.
They're going
I
to
mean, right
send in
now
the
it's
IRS?
yeah.
Who's going to go do that? They don't even have that kind of a system set up. It's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, well, these were great points, and thank you, gentlemen, for all of your time and insights. Just to kind of I mean, we only had an hour today, and this barely scrapes the surface. So, like Al said, a lot of this is, us kind of bringing it to your attention, trying to scrape the surface, but take the time and do the research yourself, and see how it's going to impact you. I'm actually going to throw this out there too. I had to read a book when I was in grad school called Naked Economics. And it's kind of like a Freakonomics, but it was one of the best books I've ever read. And it's really interesting because it looks at things like these policies, and they have an entire chapter that focuses on unintended consequences, things that are good or meant for the good that don't end up the way they should. And the idea there is going back to what Al said, just thinking about this kind of from the big picture, thinking about this holistically. How does it affect you personally? How does it interwork? Yes, the debt's gone up, but what does that mean in the grand scheme of things? So, we couldn't cover every single detail today, but I think we did a good job of breaking the ice. And I really appreciate everyone joining us. And Al, Gary, David, Aaron, thank you for your time. Any closing remarks?
Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to Band Jam, Gary. What's the deal?
Coming back, man. Just everybody hold on. Once we get kind of a green card on COVID and things are starting to settle down, definitely I think summer. Yes, we can put it out, summer. This summer is going to happen. So.
And I think if anything wasn't answered today, if you have really specific questions, we're here. We focus on education. We've got some brilliant minds here that really know their stuff. Reach out to us, reach out to them. We'll answer it for you.
I just like to say one thing, Andrew. This whole thing's it's complicated, and just don't be black and white in your thought process, right or wrong. Because when you look at minimum wage at $15 an hour, I'm a real big proponent of credit, job credit and training, because we can train, and you can turn a minimum wage job into $100,000 six-figure job by learning to be a plumber, an electrician, drive a truck. So there's, we all have to work together on all of this stuff as we move forward.
Absolutely. John, the name of that book was Naked Economics, like running around naked and economics. So great book though. All right, well, we're going to sign off, and thanks everyone for joining us. We will be back in a few weeks. I don't think we have our calendar, but the next event should be in a couple weeks, and we'll be sending out this presentation, the materials, and the upcoming events that we have via email. So keep an eye out for that, and look for us on LinkedIn, and check out our website every now and then. Thanks.
Thanks, Andrew.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Enjoy life.
Thanks, David.